Daf Tzadi Tes Amud Beis, 4 lines from the top. Boy mine Rab Mordechai Mirov Amud Rishus Harabim Gavoy Rochav Dalit. If you have a post in the Rishus Harabim that's 10 tvachim high and 4 wide, 4 by 4, so it has the dimensions of a Rishus Hayochid. V'zarak v'nachal gabav mahu, and a person threw something and it landed from the Rishus Harabim. He threw it and it landed on this post. What's the din? Do we say the Akira was from the Rishus Harabim? It landed on the post, which is a Rishus Hayochid, so you have an Akira from the Rishus Harabim, Hanach on the Rishus Hayochid, and therefore it's Be'isr, and therefore it's a Malacha. Or perhaps we say came the Makom Petur Kasiloi, or perhaps we say that no, but it traveled through the airspace that's higher than 10 above the Rishus Harabim. That airspace is a Makom Petur, so it's traveling from an Akira from the Rishus Harabim, but through the airspace of a Makom Petur, and only then landing in the Rishus Hayochid, and perhaps it should be potter. Now Rashi points out, even though the airspace above the post is a Rishus Hayochid, because the airspace above the Rishus Hayochid is Oila Ad L'Rakia, so the entire airspace is considered Rishus Hayochid, but as it traveled on an incline, and it traveled in the airspace above the Rishus Harabim higher than 10, which was not on the post, and only then landed on the post. So it traveled from Rishus Hayochid derech the Avir of Makom Petur, and only then landed on the Rishus Hayochid. So that's the Shaila. Frektai says, well, why isn't it partial? We have other cases of going from a Rishus Hayochid to Rishus Harabim, or vice versa, derech Makom Petur, and we know you're chayav. We had before in Daf Lamed, Amaytz Mechanas L'Placha, derech Stav, that you're chayav. And we had the case also that if you're Moishit, or if you're Zayek, and you're Zayek from a Rishus Hayochid to a Rishus Hayochid derech Makom Avir Petur, derech the Avir of Makom Petur, rather, that is chayav. So we already know, we have other precedents, other cases where traveling through the Makom Petur, and nevertheless you're chayav. Taisa says that those cases are where it's from a direct force. There's an Akira, he's walking, he picks it up from the Rishus Hayochid, he walks through the derech Makom Petur, and he puts it down the Rishus Harabim. Or if he passes it directly, or if he throws it directly. But this case over here is talking where it's not direct. He picked it up from the Rishus Harabim, and then he threw it, and then it, in midair, it was suspended somewhat in midair, and then came down on an incline. So it was not from the direct force. It was thrown up, and then started a descent, and landed on the Amud. So there perhaps we should say that it's considered coming from the Makom Petur. If he passes straight through the Makom Petur, but it doesn't stop, then the place the Makom Petur is negligible. He had an Akira, and it went to the other Rishus, Hanocha. The fact that it passed through the Makom Petur is not significant. But over here, it was suspended in midair somewhat, and then it declined. The descent came from the Makom Petur. Do we perhaps consider that coming from the Makom Petur, and perhaps he should be therefore potter? Amrlei Masnisani says, well, why can't you bring it right from the Mishnah? Masnisan. Also Shaila Rav Yosef, Amrlei Masnisani. He says also it's a Mishnah. Also Shaila Abai, Amrlei Masnisani. He also said it's a Mishnah. Amrlei Kula Baruch Hadari Tafisu. You're all spitting with the same spit, meaning you're all saying the same thing. Amrlei Vadlai Tizbra. And don't you hold that is so? We had the Sela in the Rishus Harabim, and it says that if you take from it, you put on it, and as the Rishonim point out, presumably, therefore, also if you throw from the Rishus Harabim onto the rock, which is 10 high and 4 by 4. So isn't that the very same case? You have a rock which was 10 high, 4 by 4 in the Rishus Harabim, and if you take from it or put onto it, so if you throw onto it, that's your chayv. Isn't that the very same case? Amalei Dilma Masnisim B'machat. maybe it's talking about a machra needle, where it travels through the air, and the height that it has to rise above the 10 tvachim height that it has to rise above the rock is negligible. It's only has to travel a tiny little bit, since it's such a small chayfetz, it's such a small article, it only has to travel a negligible amount above the rock. So perhaps we don't consider that. So we don't consider that coming from the Makom Patur. He said, Machanami, but the Machan also, it will still have to rise somewhat above the rock, so it still will be coming from the avir of the Makom Patur. Gemara answers, perhaps not. Islay Mursha, perhaps not, because we're talking where there is a small little ledge below the rock, and therefore it's not traveling above 10 tfachim. It is within 10 tfachim. Now, even though it landed on this ledge that's below the 10 tfachim, but it's still considered part and parcel of that rock. The Mursha is considered to be a Chorei Rishus HaYochid, is considered to be part of the larger rock, even though it's technically below 10, and the airspace below 10 is not Rishus HaYochid, but since it's a tiny little ledge, small ledge, it's subordinate to the rock, and also would be considered the Rishus HaYochid, notwithstanding the fact that it is below 10, and therefore the Machat did not travel above 10 tfachim, and therefore it did not come from the Makom Patur. Inami, the Ram Becharitza, or alternatively, where it did not have to travel above the rock, there was a crevice in the rock, and he threw it straight through, and it landed in the crevice, so it did not come from above and land below. Therefore, you have no raya from the Mishnah that something that travels above the 10 tvachim and then starts a descent and lands in the on the Rishus HaYochid. You have no raya that traveling akir from the Rishus HaRabim through the avir of the Makom Patur and then descending and landing on the Rishus HaYochid. You have no raya that the person would be chayav. However, as the Rishonim point out, this is the Dechiyah Ba'alma, but really, and the Pashup Pshat in the Mishnah is that there would be a raya that even though it travels through the avir of the Makom Patur, that you'd be chayav. Amar Rav Meisha, boy Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan had the following shayla. Kayusel b'Rishus HaRabim, if there's a wall and the Rishus HaRabim, Gavoya Yud ve'ein Rochav Harba. It's 10 high but not 4 wide. So on its own, the wall should not be considered to be a Rishus HaYochid. But however, Umukaf lekarmeles vaso Rishus HaYochid. But the land abutting the Rishus HaRabim was a karmeles. Now this wall surrounded the Carmelis, thereby turning it into a Rishus HaYochid. V'zorak v'nochal gabov, and someone threw something that landed on top of the wall. Mahu. What's the din? Me'amrin came a rochav dalid makam paturhu. Do we say that since the wall is not 4 wide, it should be considered a makam patur, not a Rishus HaYochid, and he's patur? Or do we say that no, since it turned it into a Rishus HaYochid, this wall made it into Rishus HaYochid, literally it's like the area is filled up. So meaning it made it into Rishus HaYochid, it's part of the Rishus HaYochid, and therefore the top of the wall, even though on its own independently would not be Rishus HaYochid because it's not Rochav Daled, but since now it made it into Rishus HaYochid, it becomes part of the Rishus HaYochid, and it should be also have a din of Rishus HaYochid. Omra Ula, and the way most Meforshim explain Ula, what he answers is a different explanation. Kal v'chaymer. La'achir ma'isem bechitza la'atzma le'kol sheken. Seems to be a different line of reading, not either of the two tzdodim that we just mentioned. I mean, it's a kal v'chaymer. If it makes it mechitza, kal v'chaymer la'achir ma'isem mechitza, it makes the land, and it's a mechitza to turn that land into Rishus HaYochid. If it has the power to make the Carmelis into Rishus HaYochid, la'atzma lo kol sheken, it certainly should make itself into Rishus HaYochid. Itmar nami amar Rav Chiya Rashi amar Rav v'chein amar Rav Yitzchak amar Rav Yochanan kaisel b'reshus harabim gavoya yud vein rochav arba mukav lekarmelis v'asar reshus hayachid hazarek v'nochal gabav chayev lacher ma'isa mechitza lasman lekol shekain. If it made others into mechitza, certainly it should be and make itself into a mechitza. Taisus explains that this shaila is only if it's mukav to a karmelis, and if it's a question of making a karmelis into a reshus hayachid. But if it's mukav to a reshus harabim, and it changes the reshus harabim into reshus hayachid, then certainly we would say the sword. I mean, the whole shaila is where it's mukav lekarmelis, so the transition is not that great. The Midoraisa, this land over here, is not a Reshus Harabim. So it made it into a Midoraisa. What's a Midoraisa is considered a non-Reshus into Reshus Hayachid. But if it turned it from a Reshus Harabim to Reshus Hayachid, then certainly we would say then it in itself is a Reshus Hayachid. Tosfos also points out that even independently of this Kal V'Chomer, of this Svara, well, why shouldn't we say that the wall should be considered a Chayr Reshus Hayachid? Why shouldn't we say that even if the wall itself is not a Reshus Hayachid, even if though it doesn't have the dimensions of Reshus Hayachid, why should it not be considered a Reshus Hayachid by virtue of the fact that it's abutting the Reshus Hayachid, it can be used by the Reshus Hayachid, so it should be considered like Chayr Reshus Hayachid, similar to what we said just earlier before about the rock, that if there is an indentation, if there's a lower point on the wall, on the rock, that is considered a Chayre Reshus Hayachid. So why don't we say the same thing here as well? So Tosfos says, no, that there's no comparison. Because the case of the Charitza before, then it is more nicha to be used. The people can use it much easier. Because over there, it's nicha tashmisha. But over here, the top of the wall is not nicha tashmisha. In order to say that it's considered Chayr Reshus Hayachid, it has to be something that it is used by it can be easily used by the people, and therefore it's considered to be part and parcel of that Reshus. Then we say that it's considered subordinate in part to the Reshus. But the top of the wall itself, it's not Rochav Daled, is not Nicha Tashmishte. If there was a bore, there's only 9. So it's not a Reshus Hayachid. The depth of the bore is only 9, so it's not a Reshus Hayachid. And he dug out a portion of it, and now it is 10 deep, and now it's Reshus Hayachid. Mao, what's the din? So now he dug out this chulya, he dug out this portion of the bore. Now he's removing this earth from the bore. Now at the time he started to dig, it was only 9, so it did not have the dimension of Reshus Hayachid. But now after he removed it, the bore is 10, and now if he removes that chulya and puts it on the side of the bore, which is Reshus Harabim, is that considered that he was oiker from a Reshus Hayachid and menich and Reshus Harabim, or do we say no? But at the beginning of the process, when he started to dig it out, it wasn't 10 deep. What's the din? Do we say akiris chayfetz v'asiyas mechitza b'hari adori kasi? Do we say that the removal of the chayfetz, the removal of the chulya, and the making and creation of the mechitza happens simultaneously? U'mechayev and ischayev, or loy mechayev. What do we say? He's not mechayev. Now, if you'll say that since there was no mechitza to begin with, he's not mechayev, meaning at the time of the akira, it did not have mechitza, so we do not consider it to be an akira from the Reshus Hayachid. What about the following scenario? Let's say the bor was yud, it was a Reshus Hayachid, but then he put the chulya into it and now lessened it, so now after the hanacha it's no longer Reshus Hayachid. Mao, do we say hanacha chayfetz v'sil mechitza b'hari adari kavasim chayev or loy mechayev? Do we say he took it from the Reshus Harabim, he put it in the bor? Now, do we say that, well, at the time that he put it into the bor, at the time that before it was actually placed down on the board, it was Rishus Yachid, and therefore we should say that he took from the Rishus Rabbim and he put it in the Rishus Yachid, or do we say, but since at the time of the Hanacha, coinciding with that, simultaneously, the bore is no longer 10 deep, it's not considered being munach in the Rishus Yachid, so he's potter. Do we say that since this happens at the same time, therefore we should say that if it happened at the same time, it's not considered to be a hanoch in the Rishus Yachid, because by the time it was munach, it's no longer Rishus Yachid and he's potter? Or do we say no, but at the time that he took it from the Rishus Harabim, and now he's placing it into the bore, at that time when he's placing it into the bore, it is a Rishus Yachid. So, it seems to be that this is exactly the same shaila that we had previously by the Akira. Why does the Gemara say Imtim Salaymer? That Imtim Salaymer came into Loi Havim Achitzmi Kora, you're not chayv. What about this case? Isn't it the very same case? Isn't it the very same shaila, rather? So, based on what Taisa said earlier, is that, no, the Akira is more essential for the Malacha. The more fundamental part of the Malacha is the Akira. So therefore the Gemara shaila is, even if you're going to say by the Akira that no, since at the time that Kevan Imtim Salam came to Loy Havim Mechitza Sarmi Kora Loy Mechayev, to be chayv, to consider an Akira, it has to be, the Rashus has to be there at the time of the Tchilas Akira. If it isn't a Rishus Yachid at the time of the Tchilas Akira, it's not considered an Akira, but perhaps that's only Akira, which is the more important, the more fundamental part of the Malach. But perhaps, as far as the Hanacha is concerned, that would not be the case. So that's the Shaila. So, Zok Gemara Tifshalei Medidei, we can prove it from the Mishnah itself. Tisnan Azarek Arba Amas B'Kaisel Malam Esar Tvachim, if a person throws something on a wall, and it's higher than 10 Tvachim, Kazorek Ba'avir. The airspace above 10 is not considered the airspace of the Rishus Rabbim and his potter. But Lamata Me'asara, if it's below 10, so that's the Avir, that's the airspace of the Rishus Rabbim, Kazorek Ba'aretz. That's like he threw it on the ground, so that's Dalet Ames B'Rishus Rabbim. He's chayav for being Zorek Dalet Ames B'Rishus Rabbim. Ba'azorek Ba'aretz Arba Ames chayav. And if someone throws Dalet Amas on the land of the Rishus Rabbim is chayv. So similarly, if you threw something on the wall and it was 4 Amas away, is chayv for a Zarek Dalet Amas Rishus Rabbim if it's below 10. Well, how can it be chayv if he threw it on the wall? It didn't land. There's no hanacha. We're talking about where it's a sticky date and it's stuck to the wall. So there is a hanacha, it's landed on the side of the wall. So based on the svara that you want to say, that if we look at it and we say that at the time the hanacha comes together with siluk mechitzas, well, by the time it landed on the wall, it stuck to the wall, the distance between where he is and the wall is less than Dalet Amas. If you say that when you place something in a bore, and which is 10 deep, and at the time you put the chulya in the bore, now it's no longer 10 deep, so it's not considered putting something in the Rishus Yachid, because at the same time that it was noch, the depth is no longer 10. Well, here also when he threw it, by the time it stuck to the wall, it's no longer Dalet Amas, because you'll say that simultaneously the wall now became thicker because it has now this dvela stuck to it, became thicker, and therefore the distance between the thrower and the wall is now no longer Dalet Amas. Just like you would say that when he put the chulya in the bore, it's no longer 10 deep. Now, from the fact that we do say he's chayiv, doesn't that show you that we do not say that it's potter, that it happened at the same time, and it's not considered like he put it into the bore that's 10 deep? Where it says, no, it's different. Over there, he's not mevatale to the wall. It's not considered part of the wall. It's not considered the wall itself. So the distance between the thrower and the wall is still Dalet Amas. The Devela, he doesn't tend to keep it there permanently. It's temporarily stuck to the wall. So we still consider it like he threw Dalet Amas away. He threw the object and it landed. And we, as the Ramban says, we view it from the point of where it landed. So even if the date itself is within the Dalet Amas, but we view it from the point of landing. It landed on the wall, which is Dalet Amas away. And the wall still is Dalet Amas away because the Devela is not part of the wall. But when he takes the Chulya and the bore and he dumps it into the bore, he's filling up the bore. The bore is now no longer 10 deep. So the bore is now no longer Rishus HaYachid. So it's a completely different scenario. You cannot bring an analogy. So we have not resolved this Shaila. Let's say through a board and it landed on pegs, it landed on posts. What's the din? So now the posts themselves are 10 high, but they're not 4 wide. So the posts themselves are not a Rishus HaYachid. But with the board, after the board lands on the posts, now you have a platform which is 10 high and it's Dalet al Dalet. So now the top of the board of the daf is a Rishus HaYachid. So what's the shaila? Now, my kami boile, what's the shaila? Hanachas chayfetz v'asiyas mechitza b'hadei adari kos. So your shaila is, if the hanacha chayfetz and asiyas mechitzas come simultaneously, do we say, well, by the time the board landed on the post, now it became a Rishus HaYachid. It wasn't before, but now it is. So should it be chayav? Well, hainu de Rabbi Yochanan. Isn't that the same shaila that we just previously had? Where it says, no, ki kami boile l'rava, ki going to zorach daf, the chayv like above. Not only through a board, but there was an object on top of the board. Mine. Do we say, well, the chayfetz, the article, that object is on the board. It's resting on the board. So should it be treated as the board itself? So if we say that we look at the board, we don't look at the board as being landed in a Rishus HaYachid because at the time that it was thrown onto the post, it was not yet a Rishus HaYachid. And therefore, the object on the board should also not be considered to have been thrown from a Rishus HaRabim to a Rishus HaYachid, and he's potur. Oidilma, no. The board, that's one shaila. But the chayfetz came in Deloy Efsher, Deloy Midla Purta, V'Hadar. But the chayfetz, it has to inevitably jump up a little bit as he's throwing it. It lands, the chayfetz pops up a little bit. So should we consider it that the board landed first, then the chayfetz landed on top of it, and then the chayfetz certainly landed on Rishus HaYachid, and it's Gasis Mechitza V'Anachas Chayfetz Tami. So Teku, that's the shaila. Do we say, now the board is one shaila, the Rav Yochanan is one shaila. That do we say Hanachas Chayfetz V'Chisias Mechitza B'Hadei Adorikos? So that's one shaila. This is another shaila. If you have an object on the board, do we say that the board landed first and then the Chayfetz landed, so the Chayfetz landed on Rishus HaYachid, or do we say it happened mamish simultaneously and it's not considered like the Chayfetz landed on the board, which is a Rishus HaYachid? So that is a take home.